1. Hi guys and welcome. Hi Gavin, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh,
so today we are chatting, it's great to have you here. Today we are chatting about rider training to benefit the horse's movement and alignment with Gavin McDermid. So those of you who are joining us live, it's so amazing to have you. We're really here on Facebook so that you can chat with us and engage with us. So feel free to ask any questions, jump into the conversation, keep us on our toes. We love that. We're here to have a conversation with you. So welcome if you're joining us live. If you're watching us as a recording, it's amazing to have you. We're all about convenience, so we love to have the recordings available to you. Let us know if you have any questions or comments, share information with us, share any thoughts that you have with us. We love to hear from you. So before we jump in, I want to take a moment to just remind you guys that we are running, like it's literally the last few days of our data collection for the industry report. And we're sitting at about 550 respondents right now. We're aiming for 1,000. So please, please, please guys, take a moment to just fill in the industry report. I'm going to share the link with you quickly and share the link, share the industry report with your community so that we can just get it out there and get as many people to respond in the next few days as we can. Okay, but enough about all of that. Gavin, will you please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you developed Out the Saddle?
Cool, no problem. So 8 years ago, I had a personal training studio, and one of the girls that I came to see a chiropractor who was working with me and fallen off a horse and hurt her back. And after the chiropractor worked on the chiropractor suggested that she did some core and alignment sessions with me. So I did some training with her. And a couple of weeks afterwards, she came to me and said to me, "It's so weird, since I've been going with seeing you, my horse goes better." And I was like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." So I then drifted off and took the next 2 years after that to actually attend horse riding lessons, to go to shows and get into the industry and just start seeing patterns of what was happening and realizing, sitting at a horse riding coach's yard, she kept saying the same things to all the riders, but none of them were being corrected. So 2-3 weeks later, it was the same conversation. And a lot of emphasis was being put on rider posture and how problems with the horse. But no horse riding coach is taught to tell a horse rider how to move. They tell them how to ride. Okay, so from there, I started taking on a series of riders and I trained them, and we all found the horses had a similar response where they went better. So I had a physio and a chiro assess the horses. We then worked with the riders and noticed the improvement on the horses. Injuries got better. They didn't improve completely, but there was definite improvement. And after that, I started realizing, then sort of researching more into the horse riding courses for coaches, seeing if I could possibly go do one to help the riders. And I found that no, there was nowhere they taught about the anatomy of movement. And yeah, that's when I started the OTS thing, was realizing I actually need to help the riders actually teach them how to move, because they're actually injuring the horse by the way they move incorrectly. And that's basically where it all started from.
You've said so many things there that resonate with me and that I find very interesting. So you have, first of all, no background in horses, and that's the first thing that stands out, because that's quite different.
Well, the first thing that everyone looks at me and says to me, "So like, why is your business called Out the Saddle?" I said, "I want nothing to do with a particular type of rider. So I can name my business Out the Saddle, so you get away from the horse and you come to me, we address the issues."
Yeah.
So I've never ridden a horse ever.
Oh, never. Why have you not gotten on one?
Well, because then I have none of your bad habits. So I'm ADD, ADHD, dyslexic. I'm a series of those things, and my brain sees patterns. So I've learned anatomy, so I see anatomy. So when the rider rides, I can see what muscles don't work. So it's one of those things that I have as a gift I can do, and literally someone does a squat or a lunge in front of me and I'll tell you what muscles aren't working, how we can address it and fire it up. So it's almost something that can't be taught. I have got an idea of teaching coaches and stuff what they need to look for, but a lot of it for me is just a natural vision that I have when I see people move. And I have started looking at the horses now a little bit as well, and I can see some things on the horses, the way they move, and I can see how the rider's affecting it. But yeah, there's a lot of very common patterns out there on injuries and stuff.
That's really interesting. So I love looking at patterns and knowing what certain patterns are out there. But I always, well, in my more limited experience, I find that there are so many more deviations from the pattern that I always end up throwing patterns out. So what are some of the patterns that you're seeing that are staying consistent across clients?
Oh, so 95% of all my horse riders have the same problem. So that's how common the pattern is. There's only a 3 to 5% of all the riders I've ever seen over 8 years that are different.
That's really interesting.
It is interesting because I started looking things differently, where a lot of people address a horse rider's injuries, or they look at a horse's injuries, but we're not actually looking at where it's coming from. So, chicken or the egg? Did the rider injure the horse, or was the horse created the problem on the rider? Because I reckon that the horse has created the problem on the rider.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I do. Okay, so
obviously, I think it's the other way around.
Yeah,
but no, I think you're right. It's the chicken and the egg scenario. Which one comes
people
first?
Often wonder, which is someone injuring one of them, is one not? So here's a couple of theories that I've put to test, and they come out. So if I take 15 horses that have never met each other before, and we put them into a field, and I have a wild animal run to attack them, they don't run into each other in confusion. They immediately leave as a herd, and they all tighten their right-hand side and expose their left. So in their escape, to protect their organs, their alignment, and their structure, and that's how they just hold to protect themselves and move through the inherent reflex, your fight-to-flight panic. So every single horse rider that gets onto a horse's back, you become part of that escape. So they move you to the left.
Yes, you are. No, you're right. Horses have the same, handedness or laterality that we do as riders. So most of them are that left dominant, and so that's the flight pattern. But it also shows in asymmetry within performance when they're not in that flight mode. And we are also lateral, right? So we kind of add to that same thing. And I would kind of go further to, the horse is not truly designed to be ridden. So us getting on their back is adding some additional stresses that that they need to be strengthened beforehand to be able to carry and correctly biomechanically move with. So if you're thinking the other way, that the horse, like actually riding the horse, is causing injuries to the rider, or the horse itself is causing injury to the rider, how does that look to you? Why would you think that that the rider is becoming injured because they're partaking in that activity? Does that make sense? Was I very confusing there?
Okay, so I lost you for a little bit there online. So basically,
sorry.
No, it's fine. So basically, you said to me, I'm saying that the horse is creating the problem.
Yes.
So there's a bigger picture. So the horse starts it, and I kind of picture it, explain to riders, it's like a typewriter. Every time you climb onto a horse's back, you push one letter. So your hips move slightly to the left because the way the horse wants you to move. Then next time you climb on again, eventually the typewriter is stuck out to the side. So you don't know how to reset the typewriter after you've ridden the horse.
Okay. Oh no, are we frozen again?
Did you lose me again?
Hello? I did. Yeah. I'm sorry. I think that's my internet connection. It's been so good lately, and the last 2 days it's been giving me issues. Fine. I'm really sorry about that.
Did you get the typewriter point where the typewriter gets pushed off to the side and it gets stuck out there, so it doesn't know how to reset it? So what I've come up with this OTS system is I can teach you how to remove horse riding from your body.
Oh, wonderful.
So that each time you climb back onto the horse, you are completely reset. You aren't stuck off to the side as the horse moved you. So to go into more patterns, if the rider doesn't reset the hips, they eventually are stuck out to the left. And in doing so, they put their energy through the front right of their hip, which loads the front shoulder of the horse. The horse then gets loaded. It goes into tension into the shoulder, comes up into the right side of the pole. then creates tension on the pole, goes into the jaw, tightens the hyoid process, tightens the back of the right hamstring. Then from the hamstring, then goes into tension of the body. Then all of a sudden, the horse has to drop its inside right shoulder on the right rein. So that's the collapse from the rider's hips. Okay. So this is a standard pattern that I get, but I also know how to remove that from the horse for the rider. Once I've reset the rider, we can actually reset the horse for a couple of trigger points on the horse, which I had to reset them as well, which removes that energy flow through them as well, which is also instant as well in the setup. But that is 95% of every rider that I meet has that same problem. But they're just not talking about it.
No, no. Who would want to take horse riding out of our bodies?
Yeah. So
okay. No, this sounds. I mean, this sounds really exciting.
Yeah. So so the one question that you did that people ask me is, how does a lack of symmetry or strength affect horse's position? So I always say to them, I don't know if it's quite the right question, the way in which you're looking at it, because often our human brains perceive things in certain ways. Like, for example, I meet a lot of horse riders who say to me their hip flexors are tight. And it's because they work the whole day, they're sitting in a chair, and they get onto horses, and their hips don't move properly because their hip flexors are tight. Now, in the human brain, we associate tightness actually means we're weak. So it doesn't mean we're tight. They're actually weak in the hip flexors. And when you strengthen the hip flexors, the hips suddenly open.
Okay.
So most of them spend a lot of time stretching their hip flexors, trying to achieve a goal on a weak hip flexor, and it doesn't work. So this is where I'll bring the personal training side of it in to the rider and say, actually, you're trying to achieve something by opening your hips, and you're actually making it worse.
That's amazing. Actually, I did a research refresh a few months ago that's in the small animal membership that looks at stretching versus strengthening to improve range of motion. And I think the research article's title was something like that. And they were very comparable, but with strengthening having some additional benefits above stretching. And I thought that was really interesting and really important for our patients to consider as well, because just stretching, we're actually losing some things. So that's what you're saying we're kind of doing with our hip flexors and forgetting to strengthen into that greater range of motion that we're trying to achieve. I love that.
So when you open a hip and you start to make it open, the nervous system feels compromised because the area is weak, so it tightens it up again. If it's strengthened, it allows it to open with confidence. So when you want your legs to adduct and roll open and sit into your seat, if the hips don't feel that they're stable, they tighten because they're weak, not because they're unable to move. So my program addresses that, and we work through the strengthening of the hip flexors and actually getting them to move properly and open up the legs and how to do the releases. And there's different layers. So I have to strengthen a certain part of the hip to strengthen another part of the hip. It's layers of muscles that you need to go through. So before I strengthen your piriformis, which is attached to the femur, which rotates the leg, your glute medius has to be strengthened first. And these are patterns of strength in phases that allow you to get a better seat. So within my program, it normally runs on a 6-week cycle. At the end of 6 weeks, we readjust and then readjust. But it takes about 6 weeks for you to settle into the program to the point where you can actually go to the next level.
Can you describe your program a little bit more to us? So I love that you've just given us those layers. What does that? What is it going to look like for someone who signs up with you and wants to go through it?
No, sure. So normally, depending on the different areas, I normally go to yards as opposed to a person. And set up and normally do 10 riders a day. We then do an in-saddle ride where they show me their ride for 10 to 15 minutes. I then take them off and put them on the floor, and I actually show them where their hips are blocked and where their body's blocked. Then I reset them and show them how we can get full range of motion back into the body by removing the horse riding from their body. We then put them back on the horse and have them feel the difference in the seat and how it actually works. So that's what I call my assessment process, where we actually show what seat you could have if I was standing next to your yard every single ride. But you don't want me standing there every single ride. So then what I do is I design the 6-week program to remove me. To say, if you do my program, when I come back, I actually see you can reset yourself, and I teach you how to reset your own hips. So the program is a 6-week training program where you need to do 2 or 3 times a week. It takes about 35 minutes to get through the exercises, and they're all body weight based. And the reason why I shifted the exercise routine from that side to actually looking at body weight was working with a girl who's been to the Paralympics, and she had 6% muscle use in her leg, and she can ride Prix St. George dressage. So then I went, how much muscle do we really need to ride a horse? So I was kind of going, well, I'm trying to strengthen. This is when I was first training the riders, like a personal trainer, strengthening the legs and putting all this muscle on to make them ride this. And I realized the horse actually feels a fly on its back. So why do I need to bully it? So I actually teach the riders how to use less muscle, but more clinical movements. Okay. So the program is designed to teach you to move well, not to move a lot of weight well. So it's all about body weight and about how well you move as opposed to how much you move. So the numbers I give you are achievable numbers by the end of 6 weeks. So if I ask, for example, for push-ups, and all the girls go, oh, push-ups, I want 3 sets of 10 by 6 weeks. But then I show you from my base of knowledge how to actually strengthen you for push-ups without you doing anything. I can actually make you stronger already just by putting a ball between your knees and you squeeze it between your knees. It doubles your arm strength. And all of a sudden you're achievable. Yeah.
Interesting.
The nerve, it's working through anatomy trained. So there's a nerve that runs up the inside of the arch of your foot that goes through the inside of the knee. It bypasses the hip, goes through your internal obliques, runs up into your back into T8, T9, and it stabilizes your core while you functionally move. So, so looking at that side of it, I bring that side into the exercise routine to actually make things achievable so you can run the numbers and build up the neural pathways to keep yourself moving better. So other examples I give the riders just to get their head around what's happening is if I ask you to use a hula hoop, you'll be able to throw it the one way, but not the other. So all of a sudden you climb onto a horse and you want both reins to move the same way, but you can't even move a hula hoop the same way, never mind a horse. So your neural pathway through your one oblique doesn't fire the same. So on the left rein, when you turn the horse, you turn nicely. On the right rein, you lean. Because your internal oblique doesn't fire the same. So because your internal oblique doesn't fire, you cheat by leaning.
Yeah.
So this in turn puts weight through the saddle, which goes into the horse's back, blocks its spinae erectae from sliding under the saddle. So it has to drop its shoulder to move you because you've asked it to. So the compensation is a cheat from upstairs, and therefore the horse moves and through that hip differently. So in my training program, I teach you how to get both sides of the body moving evenly so the horse can respond to the even signals. It's the same as someone going to stand behind you and they poke you in the same rib, and then you collect as you're being poked. But if I shift my fingers, do this, you'll bend the one way and you'll struggle to come back the other.
Yeah.
So if your legs aren't touching the horse's rib cage in the same way, it doesn't know what to do. But as we go through the different layers, we get more technical. So you asked about common patterns that I get with riders. I'll give you an example. Stirrup discrepancy. So the stirrup that is lower than the other one actually requires more weight, and that doesn't make sense to you.
Yeah.
So the one that's lower needs more weight.
More weight,
it's going to go lower down. So what's actually happening is on the joint, on the hip joint down through the knee, there's actually a collapse. So the glute medius isn't firing in the hip. So the hip is now unstable. Therefore, the tension goes from the front of the hip to the inside of the right knee. So now the horse rider's point of contact on the horse is inside right knee, left bum bone. They don't have a right bum bone to work from. And that's because the right stirrup is lower than the left because the stabilizers have kicked in and pulled the hip down. So it looks that way. So there's a way in which I actually reset that. And as soon as I've done the hips, the stirrups go level immediately.
That is so interesting. I love that you've mentioned that because I have, I did something the other day which was hilarious. I have a big Pilates ball and I put my saddle on it and sat on it at my desk. It was the first time I'd done that. And as I was sitting there, I was kind of rocking back and forth, and the one stirrup was hitting the ground and the other one was really far from the ground. And so eventually I was like, no, this doesn't make any sense. I got off and I looked at the symmetry of the saddle and the length of the stirrups, and they were 3 holes different. And my body was not telling me that they were that amount different. And I was just like, how did I not even realize that? It was humongous.
So was your right one longer than the left one?
It was my left one that was short, the right one long.
So the right one is longer, okay.
Yeah.
So that's that 95% problem that I have.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I could only laugh at myself.
Yeah. So I come across it a lot with riders come to me and they say to me, "Yeah, my one stirrup." And they often tell me, for example, like it's the way I get on the mountain block and I push more weight into this within the other, and that's why. And I'm like, no. You literally just reset the hip and put them back on, and the stirrups are level. I'm like, it's done. So I get a lot of wow moments with a lot of the riders because some of them have been working on a lot of things with the horse for a long period of time, and within 5 minutes the horse is perfect. We can change reins.
Yes, I think right in the beginning you mentioned that you were watching these instructors and they were saying the same things over and over again and not really getting change. And I think that's one of the things as riders that we become the most frustrated with, is that we can just for years stay in the same pattern where we're not managing to change those things that our instructors or coaches or whatever are trying to show us or tell us, and we're just repeat, and it is incredibly frustrating. So one of the ways that we fix that is through our own bodies and actually getting out of the saddle. That's very exciting to have an idea of a solution.
Yeah, so another pattern that I pick up is the horse, when it's moving, its head is tilting to the right. So the mirrors, the camera's reversed. So it moves its head up slightly to the right as the riders are moving. And that pattern comes from the fact that the glute medius on the rider's right hip isn't working properly. So the human body goes upstairs to the right shoulder and tells it to stabilize from the right shoulder. So the teres minor, which is a muscle on the back of their shoulder, trigger point becomes active and suddenly the right hand gets stuck and it can't move. So now they get stuck into the bit on the horse's mouth. And it's because the glute medius of the rider isn't working. So when I take that rider into exercises off the horse and we're doing, for example, a crab walk where they've just got to step laterally to the side, their right hand tightens the moment they start to use their hips. So the nervous system has now made it part of a neural pathway that when I activate my hip, my right hand tightens. And now it's in every part of the movement. That means every time you climb onto the horse and you start to ride and the horse makes you move, you pull straight into its mouth.
Yes.
So once we've done glute med activation and we teach that med how to happen, the hand softens immediately and the horse goes quiet in front and you're not putting on the horse's mouth anymore. So a rider that is stuck where a coach is saying that hand is stuck, it's moving, is actually a glute medius problem on the side of the hip, not a hand problem. But the coaches aren't taught that, you see. So they keep saying to the rider, move that hand, that elbow isn't bending, they're carrying on, but they don't know it's a glute medius issue. And until that glute medius on that hip doesn't work properly, that hand is going to keep doing that. Because that is how our nervous system looks for stability, not how we ride a horse.
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. So the patterns I pick up are human movement problems, not horse riding problems. Because the human doesn't know how they, I call it your seat and your cheat. So you're trying to hide the little cheats, so you can't get the horse to go to the right, so you lean it to the right because your left hip is actually stuck. And therefore the right hip is tired, so you have to lean it to get the left hip to try and get it to open, but it won't. So until you release that left hip, it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. I love that you've said, it's a person movement issue. It's not really about your riding. It's not a riding issue. So do you see, for normal people who are not addicted to horses, normal people, do they have the same things? They're just, these patterns are just not an issue because they're not bringing them into the saddle where they're affecting another living creature, right?
Okay, so now we're going to go into yes. So the answer is yes. But for example, if I asked you, I take a dressage rider and I take a show jumper and I take the different disciplines of riding, there is a certain amount that is happening on the flat, and then there's a difference when the horse starts to jump. That changes the picture. So a person who's not a horse rider, who also jumps, has certain similar patterns of collapse because they are left, right, or right-handed. So I get a lot of horse riders who do show jumping come to me and say to me, I've got a problem. My horse, when it goes over the jump, on the one rein it can turn, and on the other rein it takes 3 more strides before I can turn it. And they're saying, there seems to be a weakness in my horse. Can you please come and see what's going on? I'm like, yeah, sure. And I said to them, would you mind just telling me how you jump over a river? And they go, sorry? I said, if you were to run and jump over a really big river, how would you do it? They're like, I'd run and jump off my right leg and land on my left. And I go, so you're telling me that the horse immediately turns to the left and doesn't turn to the right because that's how you move you in the air? And they go, oh. I said, so the horse is actually catching you moving to the left as it lands, and it has to resettle you and then turn to the right. So it takes 3 strides more than going to the left rein. And they go, yeah, that's it. And I'm like, it's you. It's got nothing to do with the horse. I said, it's your brain telling you that's how you jump. So what happens with the dressage riders, I get this movement of a hip. And then the show jumpers, I call it the twerk, because their hips have this build up where they're coming into a jump and their bum builds up this little wobble. They're anticipating jumping from right foot to left in the air and landing. And if you watch them on a horse track where they're running towards a jump, they're coming in, they're literally airborne to the one side. And it's because that's how they jump. But they aren't realizing that if they ask the horse to jump, they must sit it. So when you get good at holding yourself back a little bit and just timing that jump a little better and allowing the horse to jump, it's even on both reins immediately. The horse can turn left and right. The rider moves their energy, so the horse has to respond, which is a whole different program. So that's like my show jumping program we get into. But first thing I have to do is align the rider and then teach them groundwork with alignment so the horse can actually move itself fluently on through its back, through its shoulders evenly. And then you can progress into show jumping. But until then, you've got to get your groundwork solid. Because any show jumper that I've worked with, if their canter isn't being collected on both reins correctly, they're going to struggle with the jump. So that groundwork is very important.
Yeah. Kristen says, thank you. Kristen, it's so great to have you with us.
Hello.
I just want to invite any of our viewers, please feel free to ask questions or join the conversation. We're chatting about some really interesting stuff in terms of the rider's movement patterns, horses' movement patterns, and how they're how that rider is affecting that horse. And I love that because my viewpoint and my perspective is focused on the horse 100%. I myself even very rarely ride because I love to work on the ground with the movement and the symmetry of my horses from the ground. And so that's always what I'm looking at and always what I'm thinking about is their symmetry, their movement, and completely neglecting myself and my patients, my clients, right? I'm not thinking about those riders the way that I should be and how they're impacting horses. So Gavin, you've worked quite a bit with physios and chiros together with this method. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you found in that journey and how you've been able to assist with the rehabilitation of injuries in horses by working with a rider?
Oh, okay. Where to start with that one?
I've gone completely off script here.
No, it's fine. So I'm just run that basically through. So I've been asked to look at 1 or 2 horses that are being diagnosed as being lame. And then I asked the rider to climb on and watch them ride, and then I reset the rider, put them back on, and the horse isn't lame anymore. So we actually had the horse is actually responding to the rider's imbalances so badly that the horse looks lame. Because there is instability going through the rider's hips because of the way in which they're sitting. They have an anterior tilt to the pelvis. So the horse feels this through their back, they feel this instability. So the horse tightens up and goes, whoa, what's that? And then it creates a bad pattern of movement. Leave that pattern of movement, and now you have an injury. And that's what we call a compensation injury. So the animal underneath is compensating for the rider's instability. So pinpoint some of them. I have an anxious rider who's nervous about riding when they get on, and they're also feeling quite emotional, like they have a tight iliopsoas muscle. So it's that tight psoas muscle is now going to block the hips from moving, which makes them rigid on the horse's back. So the horse is then going to have this hardness into their back. And what it means is that the horse is putting energy. It has to create energy from the back end to move. So the engine drives from the back and the front end receives it as it moves. But en route, there's you. And your job is to manage that energy that comes through you and put it through the horse's shoulders correctly, that the horse wants to start the engine up to put more energy through. But if you are rigid in between, you actually hit that shoulder hard, so the horse shuts down. So some of my riders will say to me, my horse isn't forward going, it's this, it doesn't that. It's because once I've reset them, the horse all of a sudden takes off and they're like, oh, I don't need spurs anymore, nothing. This horse just wants to go. And I'm like, it's because you're moving on the horse's back now. You want rigid on his back. So it's quite a difficult one to pinpoint with regards to commonality. I get a lot of right SI problems coming from the inside right hip. When we discuss the dropping of the right shoulder, tension in the pole, going into the jaw, into the hyoid process, which affects the back end. So in the human body, where do you think our hamstrings finish?
Say that again. Where do our hamstrings
Finish?
finish?
It's like the neural signal to the end of the hamstring. Where is it?
Oh, I don't have an answer to that question, but I'm assuming that it's much further and lower than, the anatomical ending of the hamstring.
Okay, so it's in your jaw.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. So every single one of my human clients who grind their teeth at night have tight hamstrings.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
So if you literally take your fist and you scrape your jaw out 6 to 8 times, it resets your hamstrings. It also gives you bigger range in your hips. Where do you think a horse's hamstrings finish?
I think that it's in the same place.
Correct. Okay, so now you know where their hamstrings finish. It's in their jaw. So a lot of horses that get jaw tension who are busy, why are they doing this? Because their hammies are misfiring. So if you massage the horse's jaw out, you reset their hamstrings.
That is very interesting. So you mentioned before that you work with those anatomy trains, this is a component of that, right? That's that length and fascial connection or chain through the body.
Yes. So our bodies corresponds. For example, if you're in the human body, if your glutes are inactive, your iliopsoas muscle takes over. So the psoas feels it has to overengage, which gives you an anterior tilt to the pelvis because your glutes aren't holding the structure together. If you activate the glutes, the psoas goes back to length. So if I've got a horse that is struggling to jump from the back end, it means their glutes aren't active. So when we activate the glutes, the psoas gains length and now they gain power to jump.
So how do you do
even
that?
On flat work, giving away all my secrets in one go. Hey? So where do you think your glutes finish? Oh.
No, I mean it's obviously not the the anatomical. No.
So it's behind the head over here on the hairline.
Okay.
This is your glutes. So
all right.
Anyone who is live at the moment who wants to just check this, you can actually do this. Can you stand up for me?
Can I? Yeah, I can.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. There we
so
go.
You're just going to stand up. All I want you to do is now squeeze your 2 butt cheeks. Squeeze them and hold them. Hold. Now release them. Okay. Now on the back of your hairline, I want you to rub like 8 times really hard. Like rub that out. Okay, and you've done that 8 times. You can hold. See, you're a good horse rider. And now squeeze your glutes and see how active they are. Feel the difference?
Yeah. Okay.
So now you just activated your glutes.
So you do the same thing with horses.
So where the bridle runs behind, where the bridle runs behind the ears, underneath there, if you rub 6 to 8 times underneath, you activate their glutes, deactivate the iliopsoas muscle, and you put 2 more gears into the horse for power.
I'm gonna go try that with my horses because that's a common issue, right? That's that iliopsoas that becomes tight, and yes.
Yeah. So here's what doing this over the years now is I walk up to the horse to feel the bridle and I can't get my finger underneath it. It's on too tight. So what they're doing is they're compounding a trigger point and shutting it down. So it's equivalent to me going to you and taking a trigger point on your arm and sticking my thumb in it and asking you to move the arm while I'm compressing the trigger point. It really hurts. So you're actually deactivating the glutes with the tight bridle. So some of them, I can't even get my pinky underneath it. It's just way too tight. So I explained to the riders, you need a bit of range here with you can put your sheepskin, your rubber spacer underneath, but that horse needs a little bit of spacing and it's too active. And it's quite a sensitive trigger point because you'll see with your horse, if you are climb on the horse and you mount it and you ride it for a bit, then you activate that trigger point to get back on, your horse has gone from having 4 gears to having 6 gears of power. It's that effective.
Okay, I'll definitely have a play with that, and I think it's something for us to think about with different bridle designs as well, because it might not just be too tight, but some bridles are placing tension directly on the pole. That's definitely something to think about.
You broke up a little bit there.
I'm just commenting on some bridle designs are placing tension directly on the pole. And that's often a you know, if we think of things like
Yeah,
a
they can
hackamore.
sit there, but it's the attention.
Yeah. Sorry, my internet connection's horrible right now.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
All right, so let's chat a little bit about how riders can start to work with you. Yeah.
Okay, so I do have a website. It's coming to be launched either today or tomorrow. The new one we just put out there, where there's actually how to book a clinic, where you can actually just go in there and you'll see where I'm going to be different times. I'm in Joburg again from the 26th of May to the 4th of June. I normally come up for 10 days at a time. And then the yards can book slots with me where I come out and I actually spend the day assessing the riders and setting everything up and teaching the exercises. So on that site, you can get hold of me there.
Okay, perfect. And we have a very international audience. Is there an opportunity for people in other countries to work with you? Sorry, can you hear me, Gavin?
Yeah, I mean, I've got, I'm meant to be going off to Florida. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So just to those who are watching, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sorry about my internet connection.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Gavin, thank you very much for joining us and for sharing all of this amazing information. It's been really, really interesting. If you guys have any questions, please share them in the comments. And if you want to get hold of Gavin, you can do so through his Facebook page or through his website. I'll post those links for us in the comments as well. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Gavin.
Cool.
Great. Bye.
Cool. Bye.